Hello everyone, welcome to the sixth episode of Rendezvous with the Stalwarts, the show where we discuss the journey of stalwarts in our profession and talk with them about their experiences, projects, and their vision for the future of our industry. I am Daniel Couture, your host for the show, and in today's episode, it is truly a pleasure to be talking to Rob Smith. Rob currently serves as the Associate Technical Director at COVI and has over 28 years of experience in the structural engineering industry. Prior to joining COVI, he was part of Arup for the past 25 years and has worked on some of the most thrilling projects worldwide. He has worked on a myriad of projects and highly technical research opportunities, which we'll be surely discussing with him today. So, without any further ado, let's move in straight into our conversation. Welcome, Rob, on today's episode of Rendezvous with the Stalwarts.
Oh, hello. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to have a talk with you today, Daniel. It's an honor.
Same. It's a pleasure hosting you today. So, Rob, I'd like to start by jogging your memory during your growing years to know more about what it was that drove you towards getting into civil engineering and then pursue a specialization into structural engineering.
Well, I guess I always had a practical bent growing up, so I like to build things as a kid.
Okay.
And not just with Lego, which is kind of fairly stereotypical, but in camping and all sorts of other things about being self-reliant. Um,
Okay.
and I also really enjoyed maths. Mathematics, finding patterns in numbers, in geometry, and in shapes. So
Okay.
that's something I really focused on at school. And in the UK where I grew up, there's definitely a much more a push to specialize in academic subjects earlier than here in the US. So
Okay.
when it came to choosing subjects for my A levels, and that's the last 2 years in high school, I chose the hard sciences, so the math, physics, chemistry.
Okay.
Um, but it wasn't really until I got into my final year at high school that I really felt an interest in engineering. Although my dad's he was an electrical engineer, I kind of didn't really have too much appeal to that. But
Uh-huh.
it was it was one of my college tours, and I visited Oxford University, and I saw that they had a general engineering degree, which is
Okay.
actually quite rare in the UK. Most engineering degrees were much more focused on one particular subject, so either civil or mechanical or electrical. And I wasn't ready to choose at that time. Um, but I really wanted to still learn a lot academically. I felt I could learn a lot more practical stuff at work when I got a job. But to choose an engineering degree where I would learn all the academic stuff and then build on that in the world of work
Yes.
was my direction. So I got into Oxford University, and then I slowly focused on civil and then structural, and then in my final part of my last year was in seismic is something I spent a little bit of time on. And
Okay.
I got really interested in seismic from that point. But
Okay.
I think the focus on structural engineering really went well with my visual mode of thinking. A lot of structural engineering is about seeing how loads flow and how it all fits together, and then also how
Yes.
you
Yes.
quantify it.
Yeah.
I think other types of engineering are logical, but maybe less visual and less spatial.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
definitely think that spatial and visual thinking changes what you find interesting.
Yes. So, Rob, over the span of your long and successful career, you have moved your bases from London, where you grew up, then to the Philippines, followed by Los Angeles, and then finally to San Francisco. So, were there any specific reasons or opportunities that led to them? And how has your experience been while moving places? Like, was it quite challenging to settle at different places, or did it provide you with some great opportunities?
hmm So certainly great opportunities, but um, my professional working career actually started before college. In the UK, it was fairly common to work for engineering companies before and during college. It was called sponsorship. I think it's less common nowadays, but for me, I got sponsored through British Rail, which was the national rail system in the UK. British Rail doesn't exist anymore in the same way, but when it did, it offered a really great training scheme in much of the rail system. So you could learn about bridges, about track engineering, about stations and train operations. So I worked there for 1 year and 3 summers during college. But in my final year, British Rail got chopped up and privatized, and the great training program they had disappeared. So I looked elsewhere, and I found myself a job with Arup in London when I graduated. And Arup at the time was a really tough company to get into. It still is.
It still is, yeah.
And so I felt really fortunate to have that opportunity, and I joined.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I joined a big firm, an engineering firm, what appealed to me when I was younger was that the chance to travel internationally. And I actually got that chance 2 years in to my career with Arup. I was actually originally lined up to go and work in Thailand to work on what's called the Bangkok Elevated Road and Train System. But in 1997, the Thai economy was really suffering, and the owner of that project in Bangkok had to sell another project that they were doing, this time in the Philippines, to pay for the debts in Bangkok. The project in Bangkok ended up stopping, and I didn't end up going to Thailand. But then the project in the Philippines, Sewol Power Plant, by coincidence, was something else that I actually worked on while I was in Arup in London, working on the design of it. And so the sale of that project from this one company to another company actually provided myself the opportunity to do something different, because the new owner had a change in strategy in construction supervision, and they gave there was an opportunity for myself and 12 other Arup engineers to go and spend time on the construction site. So I was there for 1 year with these other 12 engineers from Arup, and a whole load of other people from all around the world on this construction site, building a power plant in the rural Philippines. And that was a difficult point. It was very challenging. I was a big culture shock, being in a different country, a long way from home, completely immersed in this really big construction project. But it was also incredibly rewarding in that I was completely immersed in this construction project. I learned so much when I was there. I worked so hard. I got to see how concrete and steel and everything got pulled together. And that was a real game changer in my career, I think.
Great.
Fast forward to 2008, and I'd been back in London for a number of years. 2008, the worldwide economy had crashed, and I still had a job, but many of the interesting projects had dried up. And again, I followed the opportunity where the opportunity was and where the money was, and this was 2010. By the time it happened, I got a chance to move to Los Angeles to work on the California high-speed rail, and then to San Francisco, where the boom in technology was having a big effect on real estate and construction. And so following the opportunities, but this time I was married, and I had 2 kids, and I brought along them with me to live to move from the UK to live in California. And my kids are all settled now, and they're California kids. We've been here 11
It's a tough
years.
decision for you to move your entire family, rather than the earlier case where it was only you who had to change base, but now you had to move in with your family.
So yeah, so while economic circumstances have brought all these different opportunities, it was the desire to travel and the desire to have a variation in my work that led to these
Yes.
different moves. My latest move to Korea, North America, is, you know, where I'm based out of the Oakland office.
Okay.
So just still within the San Francisco Bay Area. You know,
Yes.
is you know, not a geographic change, but it's still
Yeah.
the next change chapter in my career, and one that I'm really excited to see the opportunities it holds.
That's great. That's great. So, Rob, you have had the opportunity to work on such great array of projects, right from offshores to buildings to bridges. You have also worked on forensics and wind engineering, earthquake risk assessment, blast and nonlinear analysis. So, did you always envision and work towards getting involved on such diverse projects? And how did you keep yourself educated and upskilled for expertise in so many domains, and how has your experience been so far?
Yeah. Well, I'd always been interested in engineering from first principles. I was never a great fan of just following following a cookbook of instructions in a code.
Yes.
Um, and when I first started in Arab, my first project was a concrete offshore platform off
Okay.
the coast of Australia. I was doing this when I was in London, so I was heavily involved in the finite element analysis,
Okay.
and I was put in charge of the silicon graphics computer, and it had a disk drive that was kind of like this big, and it held 10 whole gigabytes, and I was really impressed. Um, but anyway, I got a chance to look at model the wave loading and the wind loading and the seismic, and then the temporary floating conditions that this fairly unique structure, this
Yeah.
concrete, it was a concrete box with legs on it that went and that floated, then it sank, and then it was
Oh,
held in the
okay.
water. So, you know, fairly not completely unique, but not many
Yes.
of them.
Work on
um,
it.
yeah, and so I got a real taste for exploring the science and doing the numerical methods, and trying to understand and quantifying what was going on. And eventually with Arup, this led to me joining Arup's advanced technology and research team in London, under the leadership of a great engineer called Michael Wilford.
Okay.
Michael's just retired from Arup after over 40 years.
Oh, okay.
But he was very well connected within the firm, and as a consequence of that, our team got to apply our numerical methods and analysis skills on a large variety of projects in different markets and different geographies, and, you know, different loading, seismic and wind, and a high rise, and all these different things.
Great,
And
great.
I think this is one of the advantages of working for a larger firm, is that there are
Yes.
opportunities to try different things. So the diversity of work isn't something I expected at the beginning of my career,
Okay.
but I always loved learning new things. So I always took the opportunity to try something new when it arose. Um, and one of the upshots of this is I've had a fairly diverse background, and I had the opportunity to transfer skills and technologies between different market sectors.
Yes.
An example of this is for a project I'm here in California,
Okay.
that I'm doing with Curry, and this is the seismic retrofit of an intake structure in a reservoir. So this is
Okay.
it's like 60, 70 meter high concrete tower, and it takes water in and out of this of reservoir.
Okay.
And it was built in the 60s, and it needs a seismic retrofit.
Okay.
But in analyzing it, doing the structural seismic analysis, I actually started this project when I was working for Arup a number of years ago.
Okay.
I brought skills from my offshore days and my experience of designing high-rise buildings in seismic regions, and combined the two. And so I was using performance-based seismic engineering techniques that were developed for buildings and for bridges, and then applying them to this underwater structure.
Sure.
And as a consequence, is we could really optimize the seismic retrofit design
Yes.
using tools I've got from other industries, and it's been a really efficient way of analyzing and designing it, and has led to quite a lot of cost savings. So I did the analysis when I was at Arup. I'm now in COE doing the structural design side of things, getting into the practical,
Yeah.
how do we actually build it rather than how do we
Yes.
analyze it.
Yes. Yes.
And so same project, two different companies I'm working
Yes.
for, different aspects of the companies, but same overall outcome at the end of the day. And I couldn't have got that if I had kind of just been focused on one area.
Yes.
Kind of like
Yes.
the broad mind I had to enable me to look at both sides.
That's great. That's great. Just a quick follow up. Like, is there any particular domain or kind of projects that you like to work on? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I like infrastructure. I like seismic,
okay.
and I've liked offshore. I haven't worked on that quite a while, but
Okay.
anything that's kind of like fairly extreme loads, because
Okay.
if it's really quite challenging when you're trying to follow through and design something and take it to the limit.
Okay, okay. Rob, the past 1 year has been quite a challenging period for everyone around the world due to the pandemic, and it has been no less for you as well. It was quite unfortunate for you to lose your job during these tough times. So, how did you hold yourself in such a tough situation, and how was your experience while looking for newer opportunities? Are there any advices or experience that you'd like to give to individuals who fall in a similar situation currently or something?
Yeah. So when I was talking earlier about economics driving a lot of career choices, as
Yes.
well as the opportunity to travel, the last change came for me in the middle of last year in 2020, and it was caused by the economic sort of the pandemic, and
Yeah.
as a consequence of the economic shock. Arup decided to make a reduction in force
Yes.
and a reshaping of the organization. And unfortunately, I was one of those chosen to go. And while it wasn't a choice I would have made for myself, it certainly was an opportunity that I've made the most of. And I've deliberately decided to focus on the positive aspects of what
Yes.
happened. Um, we discussed earlier all the great opportunities I've had in my career and all the different things I've done. I worked on offshore, I've worked on high-rise buildings, I've done special structures, I've done big projects, I've done small projects, I've done infrastructure, buildings, technical studies, feasibility studies, all these different things.
Yeah.
And so I had a big menu of experiences and memories of like to reflect
Yes.
back on. So
Yes.
this time I took the time to think and do some soul searching about what I really enjoyed doing, and how I could make the most of that. And I
Yes.
also spent a lot of time talking to people in my professional network, to see how their careers have
Yes.
gone. So no two careers are the same. I spoke to a lot of people who I used to work with, people who I used to work for, people who used to work for me,
Yeah.
people I know through my technical committees, and sometimes just friends who work in the
Yes.
industry.
Yes.
And so from that, I could reflect on myself, and I concluded that I think I was happiest when I was working on something bigger, being part of a team, and doing a project with purpose
Yes.
in society. So yeah, and the other thing is I wanted to focus more on the technical aspects. of work and slightly less on the commercial aspects.
Okay.
Now, as an engineer, it's important to have skills in all sorts of things, so technical
Yes.
and commercial and people management and client facing and marketing and all of these things. They're all important, but depending what you enjoy, you need to get that balance right. And so for
Yes.
me, that the balance is primarily on delivering projects, primarily on learning technical things, but also having a little bit of the other stuff. But it's the balance is different for
Yes.
different people.
Yes, definitely,
Um,
definitely.
and COE actually offered that opportunity, and it's in the title, the job title I have, which is Associate Technical Director.
Yes.
It's recognizing and celebrating the technical portion of the work that I do, and some of my other colleagues in COE, that they have the same title, and they're focused on technical things, and some of the other people are technical as well, but
Yeah.
their balance is slightly
Different.
different. Yeah,
Yes.
so I had this opportunity to kind of like decide, where do I fit and what do I do.
Yes.
And the other thing, COE is doing great projects, stuff that gets built, but design build projects, and a real great track record. COE is also, it's very well known within Northern Europe and around the world for world-class infrastructure. It's the
Yes.
design of the world's longest suspension bridge, the Kanakalali, I'm going to get that pronunciation wrong, bridge in Turkey,
Yeah.
which is currently being built and designed by our offices in Denmark. But in North America, COE is less well known.
Yes.
It has been operating for over 30 years in the bridge, tunnel, and marine engineering sector, but with different brand names. And it's just in the last 5 years that it kind of rebranded under the COE name. And it's growing, and where there's growth, there's always good career opportunities. So I've joined, and I'm working on a couple of big projects. The Houston Ship Channel project, which is a new cable stay bridge in Texas, and then also another project in Texas, the Port Arthur Sabine to Galveston flood protection scheme,
Okay.
which is there providing new flood barriers against hurricanes from the Gulf of Mexico. So big loads, big projects. I love it.
Great, 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 great. Hope you get many such amazing projects under the leadership at
Yeah,
COVI.
thank you.
Rob, that brings us to the end of our conversation for part one. We'll be joining in the second part of our conversation to know more about the amazing projects that you have worked on.
Thank you.